Today, we're going to do something a little different. Leather poker cards. That's coming up. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Reach. This is Weaver Leather Supply. Today, we're going to be taking on a project that I did not long after I got into leathercraft, and that is leather poker cards. In fact, I've got the ones that I did right here. See if I can get that so you can see it. There we go. You've got the dead man's hand on the top and a royal flush on the bottom. These are the ones that I did about a year and a half into doing leathercraft. And today we're going to be taking on a very simple version of that. We're going to be doing a leather poker card. So the first thing that I want to mention before we get too far into it is that obviously poker cards are very light and they're very thin, which means we need to kind of replicate that. But at the same time, we need to balance the need for putting a design on it and tooling it against that lightweight feel. So I'm going to be using 2 to 3 ounce Herman Oak leather veg tan on the project today. So I've already taken care of all the prep steps. That would be taping, tracing, and casing the leather. Now, this leather is really thin. We could go in with a swivel knife, cut it in, and then bevel it. But really, because it's veg tan and because it's so thin, we could just go in and bevel it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with a traditional bevel, and I'm going to bevel in all 3 of those diamonds. Once I've got it beveled, I'm going to grab my alphabet set and put an A in each one of those corners. So you might have noticed that both the front and the back are on the same piece of leather, and you might be wondering why I did that. Why didn't I just separate them? Well, smaller pieces of leather can be really hard to control while you're tooling it. It moves around a lot. So by leaving the front and the back on a larger piece of leather, it makes it easier to control. Now, I want the front of the card to have a little bit of texture to the face of the card. And I could go in with a texturing stamp and work the face of the card, but really I want something more subtle than that. So I'm going to go in with the tattooing machine. We've been talking about incorporating this into some projects. I've got the texture tip on the end of it. I'm going to go in with a low setting on it, down around 5.5, and I'm going to have a very light touch, and I'm just going to work in small circles and add a little bit of light texture to the face of the card. So anytime you look at a poker card, most of them are going to have a repeating pattern on the back of it. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to be using this shell stamp right here to cover the back of the card. Now, the first thing that we need to do, because we want that design centered on the card, first thing that we need to do is find the center. Easiest way to do that is lightly scribe in an X on the back of the card. Then we're going to put a vertical line in there. That's going to tell us how to run that shell stamp in a straight line starting in the center of the card. So where do we start actually adding the stamps in? Well, we want to start in the center. We want the center of the card to have the most prominent stamp. If you get it off a little bit, it's going to look a little bit funny. So we put the X in there. We've got the line in the center. So all we have to do is drop our first stamp on top of that and then start working up and down that vertical line. This stamp's really easy to work with. Just line up the bottom point and one of the curves, and it should lay out perfectly. Just take your time to make sure you've got it lined up right. We've got that repeating pattern done, but now we need to do something with the border. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using this stamp right here. Now, in the past, you may have worked from one corner all the way around. If you're new, that's probably what you've done. But if you start at one point and you work your way around the card, there's a good chance you're going to get to the end and you're going to have a gap that doesn't fit the stamp you're working with. So instead, what we want to do is we want to work one side at a time, and we want to work from the corners to the middle. That allows you to adjust the spacing so that it fits better within the area that you're working in. So I'm really happy with the way this is turning out, but if you look at the border stamp and that repeating pattern right there along the margin where they come together, there's some bare spots, and it's essentially where we don't have stamping, and they kind of glow a little bit more than the other parts of the card do. So what I thought we would do, we experiment a little bit. I'm going to go in with the tattooing machine with the texture tip and just go over those bare spots and see if I can kind of dial them back a little bit so they don't glow as much. And it actually worked really well. So with that, we're pretty much done with the tooling portion of the project. Now it's time to cut them out and put them together. But as I cut them out, notice that I'm not rounding the corners off yet. That'll come later in the project. Now that we've got them cut out, we can go ahead and glue them together. But as you do it, you probably want to be a little lighter on the glue than I was. I got a little bit too much on there. So go a little light on the glue, make sure it gets all the way to the edge, then you can put the two sides together. Once you do that, you just want to sit something that's a little bit heavy on top of it. Now, you want to check it not long after you put something on top of it to hold it flat, hold it together, because that glue can kind of squish out from the sides. You want to clean that up so it doesn't get on the top or the bottom. You don't glue it to the book that you sat on top of it. But you want to check that every few minutes because that glue can kind of slowly ooze to the edges. Wipe that up, sit the book back on top of it, give it 20 minutes to dry, something like that, and we're good to move to the next step. Once that's done, we can go ahead and burnish the edges. So we're going to grab our slicker and whatever slicking agent you like best and burnish those edges. I'm going to be using Toco Pro from Weaver. From here, there's a couple of different ways we could go. We could paint the card white. In fact, we could paint the whole thing just like a regular poker card. We could seal it and antique it. We could just leave it raw and put some neat's foot oil on it and call it a day. I thought it needed a little bit of color, but I wanted to keep that leather look to it. So I used Angelus Burgundy to paint the diamonds. So after you've got it painted in, however you decided to do it, go ahead and seal it. I like using leather sheen, the aerosol kind, on anything that's painted, just because it doesn't lift paint off the project. So I love the way this thing turned out. It feels really good in the hand. It's not as thick as a traditional poker card. It's a little thicker, but not ridiculously so. I love the fact that we were able to maintain the leather look while giving it a little bit of color. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. I will see you in the next one. In the meantime, go make something amazing.